Good morning, PT on Ice crowd. It is 8:30 on the East Coast, 8:30 a.m., September 17th. I am Mike Eisenhart, and I'm going to be talking a little bit of pop health this morning. So we'll see if anybody joins this morning on this beautiful Monday. It's going to be a beautiful Monday. I don't know about you, wherever you're at, but looks pretty decent here. And thought what I would do, good morning Dan, thought what I would do is cover a couple of key phrases that pay. The phrase that pays. I don't know if anybody sort of gets that reference if you're a radio fan, but I think that's like probably the most common thing that they do on every radio channel, you know, like call in with the phrase that pays, you know, and you like whatever, Q104 rocks or whatever it is, and like, you know, they send you to Disney World or something. So that's kind of where I want to go. I want to start a little bit with just kind of set the tone, you know. So this month is a really, really intense, crazy month for me. And the reason why is because it just seems like a lot of different things all kind of came together in September. And that's both historically, like just things that kind of meaningful to me, but then also just events. And you know, my wife and I were sitting out last night, just kind of like going through the week, which we often do on a Sunday. You know, we always sort of think about like, all right, who's taking what kid where and how are we going to make this whole thing work? And, you know, it's kind of a funny chess match that we have on a basically weekly basis. And trying to figure out, you know, who's going to make the back to school night for one of them and who's going to make the soccer game and, you know, all of this. And the bottom line is that one of the things that came up was something that she wants me to drive down and pick up from her mom's house, which is, you know, like an hour and a half away. It's not terrible. But we started to realize that like I may not be able to actually do it until the second week in October. And it was kind of like, you know, that dawned on me for a second, like, wow, there's really a lot going on. So to start with, I figure that's kind of like going to set the context. And I think the most important one out of them all, and the one that I'm kind of the most excited about, is that we are literally days away. So those of you who have kind of been following along this conversation for a bit and have, you know, have interacted with me a bit, you know that I've been talking about the fact that we're nearly 20 years in practice now for a while. You know, I've been sort of watching that number for a while, and the reason why is because if you're in a small business, and anybody who's been in a small business may know these stats or may at least kind of think about it. You know, they say that 90% of small businesses fail in the first 10 years, you know, of being in business. And then, of course, after that, they say 90% of those that are remaining fail in the second 10 years. And so for me, it was always kind of a big deal. It was like a narrative in my head that said, oh, shoot, I never started to watch, that said, you know, we should get to 20 years. That if we get to 20 years, we're succeeding at that, you know, very small percentile, you know, the 1% range, and that would be a big milestone. And so what that did is that created something for me that was like a driving force for me. You know, in many ways, when times get tough and, you know, situations aren't as perfect as you want them to be, it was stuff like that as a leader in a business that sort of rang true. It just sort of sat there and said, hey, remember, you know, only the top folks get this far. And if you really want to be something or do something special, you've got to at least get that far. That's kind of like the starting line of when things really happen. Well, that for me is days away, right? So that is the September 25th time frame. You know, between September 20th and September 25th, that was the official start of Proactivity. The books themselves, I believe, say September 25th. That was kind of like when New Jersey sort of punched our stamp and said you're officially a business. But we know it was right in there. And so this has been a really big deal. That was 1998, and this sort of time, this time of year has been a big deal for me. And I think the bigger deal, the reason why it's such a big deal is because of that narrative that I've created. Because for me, that was the phrase that pays. It was something that stuck with me and it kept kind of driving me through tough times or even sort of let us keep things in context during good times. So the reason why I think that's important is because I think all of us have those kinds of things. And I think in many ways, if we're really going to make a change in the health of populations, we have to tap into that. Like we have to figure out that narrative, that phrase, whatever that is, that meme, as some people will call it, that can really tap into the hearts of people, because that's what's going to allow them to drive a little harder, a little further in their journey. And I think we sometimes forget that. we sometimes lose that in the translation, that we think somehow that having more information or better information is going to do it, when truly it's really just the phrase that pays. It's the thing that sticks with a person and kind of gets into their heart and allows them to sort of lock on and stay motivated. So some of the other things that have kind of caused me thinking about this is that, like I said, this month is going to be very busy. So at the end of this week, I fly out to California to give a keynote address to the California Physical Therapy Association, APTA's California chapter. And I'm really excited about it because I get to kind of talk on a fairly big stage. They're obviously a big chapter with lots of folks, and I hope it will be well attended. But it gives me a chance to sort of push some of those key phrases, kind of get those seeds in the heads of more people in hopes that they'll, sort of germinate and we'll get somewhere. And then, I come home and I'm home literally for like an evening, and then I fly down to Atlanta and get to be in front of a couple of hundred key business leaders with the National Business Group on Health, talking about, the conservative care component of well-being. And I can't wait to do that because that's another key crowd that we can plant seeds and kind of get those phrases into their brain. And so for me, I think there are some that we really need to kind of cue in on. Of course, after that, I then come home and literally the next day we fly out to Albuquerque, and I'll spend some time with folks out there and talking a little bit more intimate of a group. And then I'll come home and run the Teddy, so 50-mile couple of day run with some of the folks locally. And in that, we're building a Connect event through APHPT. Like right there in the center of town, the APHPT will have a roped off area that will allow people to sort of connect. Again, a chance to exchange information. Now, the final piece on this, the thing that really sort of stuck with me, if you get the Scientific American, I think is what magazine it was in, there's a really nice one recently about kind of what makes us fundamentally human. And one of the things that they really kind of harped on was this idea of shared culture, this idea of group, kind of connections, and the fact that communication between people is absolutely at the heart of most things human and most things that have lasted. And so with all of that context, all of that in mind, I guess I wanted to get us thinking about this as well. So for me, I know very consciously my message to the CPTA group is going to be very different than my message to business leaders in the well-being space, which is still going to be very different than the message to the Rising Tide folks in a much more intimate, involved group. They're all communicating differently. We're all humans. We're all going to be sort of connected in a space physically. We're all going to be talking about basically the same thing because, I only have really one message that I can give. And then from there, we're going to sort of take that information and change it just slightly in hopes that it resonates. So the question becomes, what is the phrase that pays? What is the conversation point that you are having clinically maybe or with your family and friends? What is that narrative that you think is so powerful that you need to be able to work into every conversation that you have? That when people identify you, they don't identify you by your title. I think that's something that is on its way out. I hope we're going to get there. That we're going to stop identifying ourselves by our title and start identifying ourselves by our mission or by how we think we can impact the world. And if we do that, then it becomes, well, what is yours? What becomes that key construct that you think you can talk, a little fly buzzing, or that you think you can speak to and that everything connects with? So, for me lately, it's in many ways been one that I've mentioned before because I think it's an easy one for conservative care professionals and one that the science just supports. You've heard me say this: movement is a window into future health. That is an easy one, and that is one that we can begin to kind of lock into. And if we lock into that, and we're willing to lock into that, then we can start to carry that and explore that with people and kind of get them thinking about it. Right, so a couple of ones that sort of I want to think about. One, it's no coincidence that I'm wearing my old doesn't equal weak shirt because I think that in many ways the literature there tells us that story. It tells us a story that movement is a window into future health, and that the window may very well be in simple mechanisms. Right, one of the ones recently that Meg Lowry sent my way was one on changes in grip strength. Right, so we know grip strength in many ways precedes a lot of the changes in health, like the changes in hand strength, right? That's something every one of us could measure in every single person every day if we wanted to. And then, of course, recent ones that have shown that this actually includes, changes in kids as young as like 5th and 6th grade, the kids who are on the low end of the strength spectrum for their body size, so relative to their size, their strength was not good maybe, that preceded health decline, like health episodes. Like, that's really important. That's a measure of movement that predicts future health. Like, that is high value stuff. And we should be talking about it at all times. And if we are, we can then start to educate folks when they are curious. Instead of pounding them with information, it plants a seed. Hey, did you know your movement today really tells us about how your health is going to be tomorrow? Find me a person who doesn't want to know how their health is going to be tomorrow, right? Find me something that doesn't, they don't glom onto that idea and say, wait, tell me more about that. I want to learn a little bit more about that. Oh, okay, yeah, I can dive into that. So that completely changes things. Right? Instead of me jamming information down your throat, which is what many of us seem to be trying to do, it's much more the idea of let me intrigue you, let me engage you. And then once you are engaged, when you're kind of connected here, now that's the phrase that pays, because now your eyes light up and I've got your attention and you want to know a little bit more about it. Because when you want to know, that's what precedes actual action, right? So like that's the key thing. And I think we sometimes forget that sort of taking things and making them a little more simplified, if we can, only if we can, but still true, keeping them still on track and keeping them in line with the information in the literature is enough to intrigue people, right? And that's really what the curious human mind wants, right? So let me give you another example, another phrase that pays. So late last week, I was in front of a group of folks who are decision makers for a fair number of other folks. And I don't want to dive into the details too much, but just understand that these are sort of like gatekeeper kind of folks. And I was in front of their group. And I only had about 15 minutes, which is really becoming the norm in many ways, right? Because let's be honest, there are a lot of different venues where they're trying to get as much information as fast as possible, and don't be boring, be quick, and be intriguing, and kind of hit it hard, right? And so one of the things that I was asked to talk about was kind of this pain issue, right? This opioid epidemic and how it's impacting the workplace and kind of what a big deal that really is. Now, on the one hand, I'm armed with stats, right? So this particular one here is the Journal of Occupational Environmental Medicine, and it's called a Substance Use Cost Calculator for U.S. employers. You can find it out there. I believe it's free. If you don't have it, I'm sure we can figure out how to get you a copy or at least point you in the right direction. I know APHP members, I think, have it in the archive. But one of the most important charts there, from our perspective, right, from the professional's perspective, is that they use this methodology to come up with exactly how much does an addiction, and an addiction specifically to pain meds, cost you as an employer based on your industry segment, right? That's a beautiful thing because it really starts to dial it in. It starts to answer the question of, like this is happening, and it's not just happening globally, it's happening to you in your industry, it costs about this much. And in some industries, it's not a tremendous amount, I mean, it's still a lot of money, a couple $1,000s in agriculture per person per year. And then in other industries, it's really costly, with the highest being information and communications at $13,534 per person per year. Now that's a pretty big nut, that's expensive. Right? You start thinking about that. It doesn't take many people in that category to really start crippling a business. But that can't be the narrative, right? Because that alone, it doesn't make sense. It's not real, right? It doesn't kind of like capture anyone's imagination. It's sort of boring. Like, yeah, it's really expensive. It's bankrupting you. Oh, bankrupting me. Now that's something I'm getting closer to. But one of the ones that I found really works is this one. Again, trying to intrigue, saying to people, listen, we don't have an opioid epidemic. What we have is a subjective well-being crisis. What we have is a pain crisis. The fact of the matter is that your employees, whether they are showing up addicted to opioids or not, these are folks who are in a crisis mode all the time. They are in pain crisis, meaning they are not well. They are in a well-being crisis. And then people sort of want to well, what does that mean? And how does it actually happen? Like, how would I know it, right? How would I see it? How could I connect the dots with that? And then you explore that conversation a little bit, and all of a sudden now they go, oh yeah, you're right. I do see that, and their heads start to nod. Right? And then we can talk about how much that costs. But the key is we have to have something, some narrative, some phrase that pays, that lights up in their brain, that sort of pulls them in and allows them to ask more questions. They want more answers. When we can do that, when we can change that, we change everything. And I think that's kind of like one of the most important things that just seems to keep getting missed in our professional crowds. We somehow keep thinking that if we can come up with better information or more research or replicated studies, that that's going to be what sways people. And the truth of the matter is nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing is going to sway somebody about a really well done study. What's going to sway someone is when they want to learn more. When they decide, hey, that is something I need to learn more about. You have intrigued me. Because if I'm intrigued, now I have an open mind and I'm willing to now understand and learn. Now you can sneak some of that information in there. But until then, they're not learning anything. All they're going to hear from you is blah, 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 blah. Okay, and maybe they'll hear a little soundbite here or there. So I wanted to kind of throw it there. I have about a little less than 2 minutes because I started my watch late this morning. But I just wanted to kind of get us thinking as a group, as a tribe, what are those phrases that pay? And can you take that to the clinic today? We often kind of get a little bit nudged on this, from our groups, and people say, well, I get it, this population health stuff, but it's kind of heady, it's sort of up there, like tell me something I can take to the clinic today. That is something that you can take to the clinic today. The conversations that you have today, and see what lights up people's eyes. Right? See what little phrases that you have, what little questions that you have, what kind of pushes a button and gets someone to wait, what? Hold on a second. What did you say there? Because if you do that, if you figure out the 5 or 6 or 7 of those that really, really matter, you're going to find that those people now begin to be influenceable. Right? Now they actually are open to your message. And if you are able to get there, then you can start the journey of change. But without that, it's just going to sort of ping off the defenses. All right, I'm going to leave it there, and I'm hoping, throw in some comments at some point if you've got any that you find to be particularly interesting. And one of the ones that, we often hear about is, the bucket with the hole in the bottle. I know Zach mentioned that to me last night. Zach Morgan mentioned me last night. Check that out if you haven't heard that analogy. But you've got them. You use them all the time. You probably don't even realize you're using them. But there are go-to phrases that you think can be replicated and that more and more of us can use. Because when we get there, right, that's maybe chapter 2 on this whole thing. When we find the 5 or 6 of them that light people up and intrigue people, and then we can replicate them, now we can actually start changing the herd. We can start moving the group. Because then other people go, oh yeah, I heard that too. Yeah, you're right. You're right when you say that because I thought about that and whatever. And they fill in the blank. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Things to think about. What are your phrases that pay? I hope you have a couple that are sort of go-to. And it's not just as simple as, hey, did you catch that game last night? That would be the biggest disappointment, I think. That if we can't get past that clinically, if we can't get past the, hey, did you see that really big hit in the NFL game yesterday or whatever, and we can't get to, hey, did you realize that, or did you ever think that your sleep was having an impact on your pain? I've been really looking into that lately, and it's just got my mind going. Like those kinds of things. Engage in a conversation. Phrase the pace. Okay, it's Monday. It's only Monday. We're just starting out the week. We're starting out the beginning of a sprint for me. So for those of you who are sprinting in September, enjoy it. I hope you find that your sprint is successful. I certainly hope mine is as well. And we will be talking again next week. Have a great rest of the week. It's only Monday. Make it count.